turn on your Instagram right now. What is the imagery you are literally being fed? And I mean fed into your body. All the circumstances that make an individual likely to become addicted to drama, we are experiencing on a mass level.
Dr. Scott Lyons is the clinical psychologist and body-based trauma expert behind Addicted to Drama, the groundbreaking book that finally explained why so many of us can't stop creating the very chaos we say we want to escape.
And then I would ask the hard question, who here is addicted to drama? How is it that everyone knows someone, but no one is that person?
But before he became the expert, he was the case study.
I was toxic, he was toxic, we were toxic, and I needed those fights or some type of drama or crisis to feel anything at all.
And he's brought along the person who's known him through all of it, his best friend of over 20 years, Nicole Asselin.
You've talked about the difference between trauma bonding and drama bonding.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I'm seeing Nikki smile. Probably the amount of times I've tried to rope her into my drama, she could write her own book on it.
Join hosts Martin Luther King III, Arndrea Waters King, Marc Kielburger, and Craig Kielburger for a fearlessly honest and often hilarious conversation about the chaos we can't quit and what it takes to finally break free.
And I felt so much shame, as I was walking down the streets of New York City, and I was like, F it, what if I'm on a runway? And I walked to...
Before today's episode begins, please be advised. This conversation includes discussions about suicide and mental health. Some of the content may be distressing. If you or someone you know is struggling, help is available. Call the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988 or text HOME to 741-741 to reach the crisis text line. These services are free and available 24/7.
Welcome to My Legacy. Our guest today is Dr. Scott Lyons, a clinical psychologist, educator, and body-based trauma expert who has helped people around the world break free from cycles of pain and chaos. Scott, welcome. We're so honored to have you with us today. And as our audience knows on this podcast, our extraordinary guests are joined by someone of their choosing who has played a meaningful role in their life. Scott, would you do us the honor of introducing your guest today?
Oh my gosh, happy to. And thank you so much for having me on the show. This is my dearest, oldest friend, Nicole Asselin, or Nikki Asselin, or Nikki Lou, however you want to address her. And we have been friends since high school. The moment we met, we were siblings, we were best friends. And she is an artist extraordinaire. She's an academic. She is one of the funniest people I know and one of the kindest human beings. She is true Minnesota blood. And in that sense of just like sweet, sweet, loving human being. And I'm so excited to do the show. It was the first person I thought of immediately when I was asked to bring a plus one.
How beautiful. So, Nicole, let's start with you. So obviously there's that connection, but when you all first met on that day in high school, how did you know that Scott was going to be someone that would have eternal placement in your life?
When I saw Scott, it was pretty much a vision. And I think that's the only word that I could use to describe. So I came, we went to a very special high school. It was an arts-based school. And we were both in the theater department, and I had left my small town in Minnesota to go to the city to be in this very alternative environment. And I was so excited. And my parents had just dropped me off at the dorm and were like, okay, see you later. Good luck. And I turn around and there is Scott in a tutu and a tube top with a hula hoop saying, hello, welcome to Double D Heaven. And our dorm was called Delta Dorm. And I just knew that I was going to be okay because I was surrounded by people like Scott.
I still have that tutu, just so we're clear.
I love that all these years later, the friendship remains as strong as ever. And Nicole, I actually love that you brought this to Scott's high school days, because I think so often we see incredibly successful individuals like Scott, and we see them today, the doctor, the host, the esteemed leader in the field. And Scott, can we actually go back to your origin? Because this is what we do on this show. We go all the way back, including to your high school days, because you've talked about how the teachers were calling you stupid and other classmates and like shoving you into lockers. And if I'm not mistaken, I think you had talked about, I remember reading that you were so desperate, you faked your own suicide, not once, but multiple times. And so can we actually go back, like before the success that you are now, can we actually go back to that time? Like, can you really take us back to that origin? And what were you really crying out for at that time?
Yeah, the school that Nikki and I met at was not the school where I was getting beat up and sort of accosted by teachers as well. That was my freshman year, and I wasn't out as a gay man then, but it certainly was getting quite a bit of flack for it. And I had an IEP, an individual education plan for my learning disabilities, and it supposedly hadn't transferred over to the high school. So the teachers couldn't understand my unique way of learning and processing. Teachers were calling me stupid. They were telling my parents I would be lucky if I could even graduate high school. I was being shoved in lockers and beat up. And people weren't believing me. I went to teachers to try to get help, and they would give me advice as to what I could do differently. And it was a hard experience for my parents to believe that this could be happening to them, because I had a very fruitful experience in junior high school. And I just was so desperate. I was so desperate. I didn't at the time know what else to do besides kind of create a drama, a scene in which people could maybe understand the pain that I was in, to help me make changes in my life that I was really desperately seeking. And I mean, I was depressed, and it's kind of an embarrassing thing to even hear. And I know I wrote that in my book, that I had faked a suicide, and I didn't know what else to do. When a child cries out and no one listens, they just have to get louder and louder and louder. And I think the same is true with not just children, but in systems that are so broken. Like, how do we start to get heard in ecosystems that choose to keep us down and keep us in the pain that we're in, intentionally or unintentionally? And so, yeah, that was a very difficult time. I left that school after these experiences, and went to a second high school where I spent the year, I said maybe 5 words the entire year. I figured that the safest way to exist was to not exist in that second high school. And, even as I say that, it brings up a lot of pain and ache of that any child would have to do that, hide themselves to stay safe. And so, yeah, when I got accepted into this arts high school where Nikki and I first met, it was like it was such a liberation. It was an incredible experience to know that I was safe, that there were people who were as weird as I was and diverse in learning styles as I was, just thriving academically, thriving artistically. Mm-hmm. It makes such an impact what an environment will do.
Oh, Scott, no, my heart, as I'm a father of 3 boys, just hearing you speak, it was just tightening as you were describing that. Yeah. Oh my God, yes.
You call what you were doing back then weaponizing empathy.
Yeah.
When we can't receive love, so we make others feel pain instead. Can you explain what weaponized empathy is, and how do we recognize when we're doing that or when it's being done to us?
Yeah. I think so many of us are familiar with the phrase an eye for an eye. And there's a way, not only can we not receive an apology or validation or love, that when we can't receive something, we can't actually do a process of repair, right? So if I say to you, I'm so sorry, but you're in such a bracing, a defense mode that you can't receive the sorry or the accountability statements. It never lands. And so while someone might say, I'm sorry, you never get to experience the repair. In the same way that I could say to someone, I love you, but if they're bracing, if they're holding, if they've had trauma, and literally their oxytocin receptors have shrunk down in response to the trauma, they can't receive the love. And so what do we do as a way of making sure someone understands us or feels us or truly gets our experience is we make them have a similar experience. We evoke an emotional response to hope that they understand at the experiential level what we're going through. So if Nikki and I were in a fight, and I am a person who has had a significant amount of trauma and is bracing, and she says or doesn't say sorry, what weaponized empathy is I'm gonna bring back, hey, that thing that you did 5 years ago, or I'm gonna talk about the something else that makes you feel a level of shame and hurt and pain, so that you understand the level of pain I am in. And that's something I discovered was happening in myself, having navigated a lot of trauma, was like there would be people in my life who would try to make repair, but I didn't believe them until they would be in some level of hurt and pain themselves. Then I would say, okay, now we're on the same plane. Now we can start to repair. But at that point, they're too hurt to even be in a process of repair. I've hurt them too far. And I've seen that in so many clients I've worked with or groups that I've worked with, is that the bracing and the ways in which we have survived to not take in more, experience more pain, more trauma, prevents us from actually doing the really important human relational work, which is repair. And instead I project that you need to be in some type of discomfort in order for us to be on equal playing field.
Hurt people hurt people. That's
Hurt people because they have to be in the same level of human experience.
Wow.
Nicole, and I know you met him after that extremely difficult time in high school. What did he share about that? Do you remember conversations and how you were best able to support him on that journey?
I think during those times in our lives, especially in mid-late high school, I think they're times of great openness. People are willing to share bits and pieces of themselves. It's a very emotional time. There's definitely a lot of hormones.
I was going to say hormones.
Yeah.
we have a 17-year, almost 18-year-old.
And so there is like this moment, especially because we were going to a boarding school. So there's a lot of time that we got to spend with one another. And of course the stories emerged, and, Scott shared stories of, the trauma of his past. And it was, for me, really more of a witnessing and a hearing and an acknowledging than, oh, I have something to fix, or, we can work through this. I think at that time, it was just being heard and being seen and being okay for who you were. And the other layer is the creative layer. And I would say most of the youth that were in our program had experienced trauma of various kinds, and embodied work like improv. And, we were even doing dance theater, and those sorts of things can really help build new pathways.
But I think one of the things that's often missed from real trauma therapy is play and laughter and humor. And that's certainly been one of the things I've tried to bring back as a traumatologist is, hey, it doesn't all have to be intense, that we build a garden of different experiences like play, like laughing again, that allows for a significant process of healing to actually do more of the heavy work of contacting and touching into the more painful experiences. So the fact that Nikki was assigned my improv partner for most of high school because no one else wanted to be, or could be. Is
I
what
bet
our
you
teacher
were
said.
hard to improv with. Like you had to, she had to go big or go home in order to
Nicole could go big,
Yeah.
and I was always very exaggerated and intensified. Like I had no fear, which was part of the problem.
And no
Like,
filter.
and no filter. Not much has changed there.
This is why we love the +1, getting all the good
He
stuff.
has no filter.
Moi?
Yeah, Martin has
Moi.
no filter.
How does that show up? No filter for you.
Can I answer on your behalf?
Yeah, because I'm not sure what she's talking about.
And then
just-
we'll ask
You got
Nikki
your
on
people
my
mixed up.
behalf.
See,
Just say like sometimes, even when we're together and with my sisters, he'll say something that even that's supposed to be like a compliment or telling a story that about, I don't know, an ex-girlfriend or just anything, and then like he'll keep going down a hill that he should not go. And my sisters they'll tell him like, bro, stop. Like sometimes like he'll give a compliment and just as opposed to stopping with the compliment, like, oh, you look nice today. Beautiful compliment.
Yeah.
Because yesterday, what you had on was not like, that's what I'm like, like that's what I mean. Like, yeah. Also, I'm reminded as when you're talking about trauma and the importance of joy, one of the things that stirred up for me is thinking about your father, because what people don't know is how funny, not only that he was and how funny you are, but how that humor was used at such difficult times after you've been stabbed within an inch of literally within an inch of your life. You know, they would go back sometimes to the hotel and have pillow fights because of the fact that you are facing death, right? So the trauma of dealing with that.
I love that capacity, and like that's so moving actually to hear in the face of what he's navigated, to be able to find the playfulness to sort of balance out the significant heaviness that most of us, I don't think, will ever know.
absolutely.
And yes to pillow fights.
And when you all are together again, you all should have a pillow fight in honor of Martin Luther King.
I spent the first couple years as a therapist having pillow fights in my office with clients.
Wow.
And people thought I was wild. I mean, I am wild. But but the significant discharge and release of all of that activation through some type of vehicle movement is essential for healing, right? It has to go somewhere.
Wow.
And it's just about being able to still feel it and channel it into some type of, whether it's a run or a laugh or a cry. These are all just vehicles for emotion to come back into motion. Yeah.
And Scott, in fact, if I can move into that area,
Yeah.
because you talked about the idea of needing to get it out, and I'm going to move a little bit further into your 20s. You were in grad school, broke up with your long-term partner, lost the big job, lost your health insurance, all at once.
Yep.
Like you shared that rock bottom period, you'd call your ex and purposely get into fights.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I was can kind of relate to that a little bit. And so when did you realize it wasn't grief? Like you were feeling something else. Like maybe it was this need to channel emotions, or how would you describe that?
I think so many of us might feel a flatness in our life, or can relate to a certain time period where we felt flat, or I think the more popular saying would be like a little dead inside, a little underwhelmed by life. And, there are certain activities or things that we might need to rise above the threshold to feel again, right? And if you've gone through depression, you might know that experience. And one of the caveats of trauma is that there's so much that has had to be suppressed and repressed and can't be felt as a means of survival. And so you need experiences that rise above that level of the decibel of numbness to experience again. And for me, getting into fights and to go do shows in front of 5,000 people and to go do improv on the street with Nikki Lou in the middle of Times Square, those type of like very high octane experiences were the ways I could know I was alive. Mm-hmm. And when I was out of this relationship that Nikki knows quite well, that was just like, I was toxic, he was toxic, we were toxic, whatever that means. It just means that we're playing each other's traumas out to the max degree, right? And staying in it, as opposed to realizing that we could separate or do something differently. And I realized in retrospect, I needed that level of chaos and crisis to actually, both because it was familiar to the ecosystem I grew up in, so it felt somewhat quote unquote safe, but it also gave me a sense of like aliveness. It was adventure. And without it, when we separated, I was like, oh, it's too quiet. And I needed those fights or some type of drama or crisis to feel anything at all. You know, when I give this example when I lecture a lot, like if you're used to salting your vegetables, right? Then you know vegetables as this like salted experience. And let's say your doctor says, okay, you got to cut your salt out. You got some hypertension issues. And you start to eat that vegetable and you're like, this is disgusting. There's no spice, there's no flavor, there's nothing here. And so you take some time and you have to maintain the doctor's orders, and over time the taste of the vegetables gets to come back, right? The nuances of the flavors, the textures, all of that returns. But there's this gap period that has to happen between over-salting your food and only knowing vegetables as this extreme salted, crispy thing that you fry or whatever, to the flavors of life that actually exist.
Wow.
And when you've experienced trauma, those nuances of flavors cannot exist, right? If we were to experience the many, many flavors of life, and be that exposed and fragmented, we wouldn't be able to survive.
Nicole, you were watching your best friend self-destruct. What's the hardest part about loving someone who's using drama to survive?
I will say it is super hard to see.
Did you know I was dramatic, Nikki?
If this is news,
Is this
Scott,
news to you? I just wanted to check in
this is
around
news.
that.
Yeah, no, it's hard. I think the hardest thing is really realizing that like the pain and the energy could be channeled into something else. That like it doesn't have to hurt like this. It doesn't have to be like this. I think the hardest part was, finding, it's like finding the right level of compassion and care and how to be heard, and also just really realizing that, for me it's like, oh, Scott, you're an amazing person, just move on. But alternatively, I will say, the thrill seeking or the desire for all those salty vegetables, or Scott has always been a thrill seeker in all areas of his life, but it has been a really beautiful thing to see the milestones shift and into, oh, these big thrills and these big bumps of drama have to happen in my relationships, to, hey, Nikki, why don't we go hang gliding? Why don't we go jet skiing? Why don't we, do all these, like, why don't you come to Greece and we'll like go on this yacht, okay, and jump off the back, like backflip off the back of this thing. It's like, okay, how can we channel that desire for extreme experience into something that is productive and generative, instead of how can I feed the drama cycle into relationships that aren't going to benefit anyone. Yeah. So that's been a beautiful evolution. I still get scared, Scott, to do the whitewater tubing, but
Oh my gosh. I took Nikki whitewater tubing, and it didn't go well.
It did end up with me crying and saying, I need acupuncture.
Oh.
Yes.
I was bringing the drama, you guys. It was a role reversal.
Well, we all have friends who want to do extreme things. And
Yeah.
when do you draw the line? Like, I have some friends who swim with sharks.
I was thinking the exact.
And I'm like,
our
okay,
exact friends, and
I
was
love
thinking
you, but
this at the
you're on
same.
your own with that one.
It's a great question of like, where do we know the line for, because novelty is a way in which we experience zest, right? We need novelty. It's the ways, there's this interesting research on time That most of us often say, like, where did time go? I feel like it's just passing me by. And the research shows that our ability to be able to focus and our ability to experience novelty is what gives us a sense that time is actually slow enough for us to marinate in. And life is slow enough for us to marinate in and experience it. And so we need novelty. We need new experiences. But do they have to be swimming with sharks is the question.
Yes.
Sometimes. I think that if we can find newness in a beautiful conversation, that's great. And if we can find it in sharks, that's great. But the question is, can we only find it in the extremes? You know, it's like if I can't go and try a new dish Nikki has and really taste the flavors of that and sit and have a discussion and a meal, you know, that's really special by candlelight or whatever, and that gets me, and I'm bored by that. And I'm not bored when I'm jumping out of a plane and with a parachute, then that's really good information.
Wow. Something to chew on. That doesn't require a shark.
What, jumping out of a plane with a parachute?
No, like just that, like can you find that same fulfillment?
Yeah.
In a candlelight dinner with a loved one as, you
Yeah.
know, jumping out of a plane.
I was that, Arndrea. There's a stage in my life I remember, like, so I did the running with the bulls, the learning how to do solo skydiving, the nitrix underwater deep sea dive, like all that stuff, climbing mountains, etc. And then I met my wife. And then suddenly, like, no, that was like the great adventure of life. Like, I never needed to do it again. Like, to your point, like kids, oh my God, all these other things that became like no desire to go, you know, throw myself in the middle of a death-defying state. To your point, those other things that fill us.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
If someone didn't invite me to hike Kilimanjaro on a second date, there was a time period where I probably wouldn't have gone out with them on a second or third date. And that only changed since last week, but I am proud of this week.
Scrolling won't change your life, but subscribing just might. We're sharing real stories, hard-won wisdom, and unforgettable lessons that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Tap that button and stay connected to conversations that truly count. Let's keep going through your life. You didn't realize this was going to be This Is Your Life. Yeah, you got a PhD in clinical psychology, which was a complete career change from directing, choreography, but then you chose to study addiction to drama. And I've heard the saying a lot of times that research really is me-search. So when did you realize that you were onto something with the study of drama?
I've done a lot of 180s in my life. I like to think of myself kind of like Madonna in a constant re-evolution. Like I'm a CEO of a tech company now, and I still see clients, but I like reinvention tours.
Young listeners who maybe are not as, schooled in Madonna from the 80s and 90s. I guess the closest would be maybe Taylor Swift in her eras. But those of us who know.
I was directing a big rock band in a show.
Wow.
And I just remember going, oh my gosh, this is the pinnacle of my career. I have more money as a budget than I could ever even fathom. I remember on my first meeting around the show, they were like, you can have penguins on stage if you want. That's how big this show is. And I was like, oh, I'm definitely getting penguins. And I was in the middle of the show and I was like, I'm not happy. And if I'm working in this way and I feel like I'm everyone's therapist anyways, I might as well go back to school for it. I started doing my master's and PhD in clinical psychology. And I was like, well, it's a long shot, but maybe I can study drama. And one of the interesting things as I started to do research was everyone I ever spoke to about it, they're like, oh, I know someone like that. And when I started lecturing about it, I would start with the question, who here knows someone addicted to drama? Not defining it at all, right? Every single person in that audience would raise their hand. And then I would ask the hard question, which was, who here is addicted to drama? And maybe one or two people would raise their hand. And I was like, well, this is really interesting. It's this concept of addiction and drama is so in the general understanding, and yet it's not in any of the literature. It's not in the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which therapists use to diagnose, or some do. And so how is it something that everyone knows but hasn't been unpacked? And how is it that everyone knows someone but no one is that person? Which taught me a lot about typically those who are addicted are the last to know. Which is when I made the joke earlier about, Nikki, did you know I was dramatic? And she, coyly responded, I was the last to know. Certainly, and especially with behavioral addictions, because they integrate into our identity, our perception of life, and truly become part of our survival mechanism. So we don't see them as "quote unquote" an addiction. The research was really exciting for me because I was like, okay, everyone knows someone or everyone knows this concept, so at least that's a starting point to really dive in and go, well, what does stress, what does drama, stress, chaos, crisis actually do for us? Because all addictions, every single addiction has a purpose. It does something. And what it does is it relieves us of pain. Fundamentally, that is what it does. It distracts us. It takes us out of an underlying pain. And so I asked, the question I had was, okay, well, if every addiction relieves pain at some level, how does drama, how does stress, which is the very thing we're inducing more of in an addiction to drama, possibly give us some type of support or sense of relief from pain? And it does. The science is really, really clear that, like, when we get stressed out, right? Let's say our video equipment's not working right now, or any minute stress to any maximum stress, you release endorphins. Just like when you go for a run, you get that runner's high, right? So we naturally produce pain relievers in our body, or blockers to pain, when we are in a stress response. But here's the kicker. If you're familiar with addictions, you might know that in order for it to qualify for an addiction, you need more to get high, right? There's a threshold, there's a tolerance level. The word is tolerance. And so, like, if I'm alcohol, for example, I will need more alcohol each time, progressively over time, to get drunk or to have the pain relief effect of it, the numbing effect of it. The same is true with stress and endorphins. So if I'm naturally getting some type of pain relief and energy, by the way, because there's an energy boost every time you get stressed, like drinking a cup of coffee, except a little bit more powerful, actually, then what happens is I get that pain relief and it feels good. I feel better. I literally feel less pain. And so I might go towards the things that keep relieving me of pain, even though they're stressful. The situations, the relationships, the circumstances, the jobs, all of that, even though we complain about it, we are simultaneously getting a endorphin release. And the challenge of that is I need more endorphins over time to maintain the pain relief. So I become stuck in that cycle of needing more stress to get more pain relief. That's the physiology that we're actually talking about, which is so interesting. And stress is not only the most contagious emotional state, but it also creates the most emotional bonding. So when I was, I moved to New York a few days before 9/11, September 11th, 2001, before the towers went down. And there's been a lot of research about this, but this was also my personal experience of, like, the first couple of days in New York. And I remember calling Nikki and being like, nobody's nice here. We're from Minnesota. We're so, like, we grew up in these small towns. We, like, talk to each other. You talk to your neighbors. And I was like, I went to a yoga studio and some guy told me that my accent was stupid. And in a yoga studio in New York City. And
Only New York.
only in New York City, my friend. And a few days later, after this catastrophic experience, the proximity, the sense of connection I had to strangers. I would literally hold people on the bus and cry with them. We would talk about our lives with each other. There was an openness, there was a connectivity. And, that saying New York strong came out of that. And what they mean is relationally stronger. And there's lots of interesting studies that show that groups of individuals who go through a stressful experience, even like sticking their hand in cold water as a group where they feel some level of stress and pain, not only are closer, but perform better in challenging tasks. So stress does these wild things. It gives us pain relief. It gives us energy. It makes us feel closer in relationships when we have a shared stressful experience. And all of these things accumulate into a need for it. It becomes part of a cycle, or what we call an addiction.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of this important conversation. Join us next Tuesday for part 2. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.